Gonna be awesome. Hey, we're in this series called It's For You. It's For You. And this is a series that's based on God's call. And what we're talking about is how God has a job for us to do. We were put on this planet for a purpose. Do you remember me saying that? That we were created by God on purpose for a purpose. And part of our purpose is to find out that specific task, that specific job that God has called us to do. And so if you were here last week, we began to talk about how do we discover God's call in our life. And we said things like you got to learn to recognize God's voice. How many of you know the closer you get to God, the clearer his voice becomes? And how many of you know God speaking to us is what gives us direction? It is what helps to push us in the way that we're supposed to go. And so we've got to learn to recognize God's voice. And let me just remind you, it's a whisper. It's a whisper. And that's why we don't recognize it so often. Our life is noisy and we're busy. So we've got to learn to recognize God's voice. We talked about how we have to let God prepare us. How many of you know God's not going to set you up to see you fail? That God's going to equip you. And he's put skills and things inside of your life that he's trying to develop and bring out of you. It's a preparation process, and we've got to let God prepare us. And then we talked about how we've got to ask the right questions. What has God put in our hand, and what are we good at? What do we love? What do we hate? And as I began to think about today's message, I feel like God brought this to my attention. And I just want to remind you of this. God's call isn't a destination, it's a journey. See, I think we get messed up sometimes. We think God's call is some mystical, magical force that's just floating around out there, and that it's just going to drop into our life somehow, some way. And when we figure out what our call is, we have arrived. I'm smiling, church, because we never arrive. That's what we got to understand about God's call. It's not a destination, it's a journey. And I began to think about, we see this in the lives of kids as they're growing up. How many of you know, I see this as kids when they're learning how to walk. Like I think about my daughter, and Lisa will tell you, she was 8 months old when she started walking. It was crazy. But she's always been that way. She just had that personality. When Lisa would roll her on her back, she would struggle and kick and scream because she's trying to roll over. She would crawl, she would stand, she just didn't want to sit still. But I remember seeing her walk down the hallway. I thought to myself as a parent, though, that walking was not the destination. How many of you know that learning to walk, that wasn't the end-all, be-all? Actually, Lila learning to walk was the beginning of a journey. And there are some things that she needed to learn, and there are some things that she still needs to learn. Like when she started walking at 8 months old, I knew that she had to learn how to fall down and get back up. I knew that she had to learn how to run and jump and skip and twirl and dance. And even now, I understand that she has to learn how to walk into uncomfortable situations. That she's got to learn how to walk into her responsibilities. I understand even now that she has to learn how to do hard things. Because let me tell you something about the journey. The beginning of the journey and the end of the journey, that's easy. Think about it. The beginning of the journey is where you're excited. It's where you're enthusiastic. It's where you have this determination to take some steps and move forward. You have this vision and understanding and picture of where you want your life to be and how you want things to be. And so the beginning of the journey is fun and it's easy. And the end of the journey is easy. Because that's where you look back over your accomplishments and you celebrate, right, church? And that's where some of us are so exhausted, you just crash and you just take a nap or do whatever. But the beginning and the end of the journey is easy, but guess what's hard? It's the middle of the journey. And here's what we've got to understand about God. God is more concerned with the journey than he is in the destination. And I know that shocks us and that surprises us, but God's more concerned with the journey. Why? Because it's in the journey, that's where we are molded and shaped to become more like Jesus. It's in the journey where God grows us up and helps to mature us and helps our life to be fruitful. It's in the journey where we develop a spiritual backbone and where our faith and determination in God is more solidified and anchored. Think about this. It's in the journey where we live out our calling. As I said last week, God has not saved us to sit. God's not going to call you to something and you raise your hands like Rocky and think, I have arrived. Now I can sit and it's somebody else's turn. No, the calling is the place where we live out our calling. Are you hearing me, church? It's the place where we make an impact and a difference with our life. And if you're here today, how many of you would honestly say, that's where I'm at? I want my life to count. And I want to make a difference with my life. And I want to make an impact with my life. Hopefully all of our hands go up. Because that's why we're here. When we live our life with excellence, when we live in our purpose, guess who's glorified? It's God. And our life points back to Him. And so I want to talk to you today for just a few moments on this idea today. How can we make an impact? How do we make an impact with our life? How do we make a difference? And I want to look at the life of Moses for just a moment today, because I think his life shows us how we can make an impact, how we can make a difference. And some of us hopefully are familiar with this part of Moses' life. But in Exodus chapter 3, verse 1, Scripture is going to be on the screen. Here's what it says. It says, one day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. Now, I think we overlook this sometimes. So here's the first way we can make an impact with our life. It's you have to start somewhere. Got to start somewhere. Amen. Think about Moses. He was doing the one thing he knew to do. And what was that? It was watching sheep. He was a shepherd. He was guiding the sheep, protecting the sheep, helping the sheep, right? That's all he knew to do. But now here's what he did, though. Number one is he worked. He wasn't idle. Can I tell you, church, you want to discover what God's called you to do? You want to make an impact with your life? You got to start somewhere. You got to work. I've got to work. And you know what? We've turned work into a dirty word. We've turned work into something that none of us want to do. Our idea of retirement is sit back, chill, relax, and let somebody else do the work. That's what we think today. And how many of you know work is how we glorify God? Work is how God is honored. Work is how we make an impact and how we make a difference. And I want you to think about this. There's great power in doing what you do well. Let me just tell you, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, when you work, you shouldn't cut corners. You shouldn't try to cheat. You shouldn't look for the easy way out. Our idea should be, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. Amen. I'm going to work hard. And through it, God's going to be glorified. Because let me tell you something about hard work. When you do your work well, guess what it does? It causes other people to take notice. I'm telling you, church, you want to be promoted in your workplace, you work hard. And you do it to the best of your ability. And whether you feel this way or not, people are watching and people are noticing. Because hard work, it sets us up for the future. Young people, you want to make an impact with your life, learn to work hard now. Because it will set you up for the future. And that's what Moses did. He worked. He wasn't sitting there saying, God, tell me what to do. Just drop it into my lap. Drop it out of the sky. He was working. And then you know what else Moses was? He was faithful. Do you know what faithful means? He was reliable. He was committed. He kept showing up. Even when he thought, you know what, it's going to be an ordinary day. I'm going to get up and just watch these stinking, nasty sheep. But he was faithful. And let me just remind you, you want to make an impact for God, you need to be faithful with where He's planted you. You may not be where you want to be, but in the meantime, just bloom where you're planted. Be faithful and work hard. And God will show up and move in your life. How many of you believe that today? So Moses shows us that if we're going to make an impact, that we have to start somewhere. So let's talk about this. I think we need to. Why is it hard for us to start? I mean, if we're honest today, I think we'd say we've got some great ideas. Some of us may even feel right now that God's leading us and moving our life in a certain direction, but we're afraid to start. We don't start. How many of you know New Year's is a great example of that? I've got all these resolutions, and some of us still haven't even started, and it's July. It's hard to start. And as I begin to think about this, I think there's a number of factors why it's hard to start. But how many of us could say that sometimes it's hard to start because we have hurts? I hurt. You know, if you've been around long enough, then you know by now that sometimes life hurts. And sometimes people hurt us. And sometimes unfair things come our way. And sometimes I think we don't start because we've been hurt, we've been wounded by life or by circumstances, and we haven't been able to let God heal us and move us forward. And so what we do is lay by the side of the road. And life passes us by. But we don't start because we hurt. And then I think sometimes we don't start because we don't want people to hurt us. I mean, if I take a risk and if I put myself out there and if I try to do what God's called me to do, it's not always going to be easy. And I don't want to be hurt. And so because of that, we sit and we just stay where we are. And life is frustrating, right? But we don't start because we hurt, and sometimes we don't start because we have doubts. Let's be honest, sometimes we doubt God. Really, God, you want me to do this? Do you know who I am? And we doubt our call, and we just have this, life is confusing for a lot of us, right? And so because of that, we don't start. Sometimes we don't start because we think we can't. I can't do this. I'm not talented enough or smart enough or gifted enough. I don't have everything all together in my life, and I can't do this. And then if that hasn't hit you, then I know this last one will. I think sometimes we don't start because we think we have tomorrow. Oh, come on, I'm preaching today. We think we have. Tell me, what do we think we have? And guess what the psalmist says in Psalm 90, verse 12, I think it is. Here's what the psalmist says. He says, Lord, teach us to number our days. Let me tell you, that was a smart person. Whoever said that, that was a wise person. And in case you're wondering, that was a powerful prayer. You know why? Because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. Today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. And Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. said this. If you've grown up in church like me, you've heard this before. But it's powerful. He said, some people can be so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. And can I tell you, that's where my fear is? That's where I fear the church has been led to. That we think we're just here for us, and as long as we're going to heaven, that's cool and that's awesome and that's great. And we're so focused on the future that we forget that we're supposed to start somewhere today. We're supposed to do something with our life now. I know this is hard, but you want to make an impact? You got to start somewhere. I like what Albert Einstein said. He said, play is the highest form of research. Amen. Think about what he was saying. You want to discover your giftings and your talents. You just want to begin to have some understanding and knowledge. You got to do something with your life. You can't just sit. You got to start somewhere. And here's the good news. It's not too late to start. But you got to do it today. You got to do it now. And here's the bad news. Tomorrow keeps many people on the sidelines. And so if we're going to do what God's called us to do, we can't be so focused on the future that we refuse to answer his call today. So you want to make an impact, church? What do? Oh, come on. We do what? Oh, we can do better. We what? Yeah. You got to say it like you mean it, right? You got to say it like you believe it. You got to start somewhere. I've got to start somewhere. Moses shows us that. And you know what else Moses shows us? That we have to step towards God. Look at verse 2. It says, there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. And Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. And he says, this is amazing. Why isn't that bush burning up? Here's what's powerful. I must what? I must go see it. And when the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, Moses replied. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression. So I've come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. The land where the Canaanites and Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Whew. That's a lot of ites. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. So think about this. Moses was doing the one thing he knew to do with excellence, right? He was leading sheep, tending sheep. But when he saw the bush on fire, he went to look at it. And can I tell you, I think sometimes we don't hear God speaking to us because when he tries to get our attention, instead of moving to him, we move away from him. I wonder what would have happened if Moses saw this experience and said to himself, whatever, and he left and went home. Maybe instead of reading about Moses, we'd have been reading about Joe. I don't know who it would have been. But maybe he would have missed out on what God called him to do because he wasn't willing to step to him. Why is it hard for us to step towards God? You ever wondered that? I mean, I think we know intuitively, right? If I'm going to make an impact with my life, I need God. I've got to step to him. But why don't we? I think the number one reason for most of us is we're too busy. And can I tell you what is frustrating about God? Please hear me, because I think you know this by now too. What makes God frustrating is his call isn't always convenient. He doesn't call us when we have our ducks in a row and we're prepared and when we're ready and we have everything figured out. God will call us at, in our mind, weird times. In inconvenient times. And sometimes we don't step towards him because we've got our schedule. And I can't mess that up. And then here's what else makes God frustrating, is God doesn't look at your calendar. God's call isn't based on your calendar. He doesn't look at your Google calendar and say, you know what, you've got this going on, and you've got this party, and you've got this, so guess what? I'm going to call somebody else. God doesn't do that. So if we're going to make an impact with our life, do you know what we need to do? We've got to step back and prioritize some things. Because can I tell you what a lot of us do? A lot of us do the good thing instead of the best thing. Oh, come on, church. And when we do the good thing instead of the best thing, we're not going to do what God's called us to do. Because the best thing requires priorities. The best thing says, I've got to cut some things out. I can't do everything. We're too busy. And I think some of us don't move towards God because we don't want to be uncomfortable. I mean, let's be honest. I'm just going to preach with honesty today. Some of the reason we don't clap in church and raise our hands and sing is because we don't want to be uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't come to the altar and respond to God because we don't want to be uncomfortable. So let me just clue you in towards God. God doesn't care about our comfort. Amen. Matter of fact, you just need to know this. I need to know this. Whenever you move towards God, in some way, shape, or form, it will be uncomfortable. And so if we're more concerned about our comfort, we won't move towards God. We won't make an impact for Him. Right, church? Some of us, we don't move towards God because we're afraid of Him. We've had bad experiences, or we've had misinformation or wrong ideas about God, and because of that, we're afraid of moving towards Him because we don't know what He's going to do. We think He's going to zap us. And then I think sometimes we're afraid of thinking, God, what are you going to ask me to do? God, I don't know if I want to move towards you because you might ask me to do something that I don't think I can do. You might have a different purpose for my life than I originally thought. And I'm afraid of that. And then I think sometimes we don't move towards God. Let's get real personal. Because we don't want to let go. How many of you know anytime we move towards God, I think we know in our heart that God's going to ask us to let go of something. God's going to ask us to let go of maybe some things. And we'd rather hold on tight instead of letting go. And so just keep this in mind. If our stuff and our schedule and our self matters more to us than God, we won't discover our purpose and make an impact. We've got to let go of some things. And as I began to think about this, I think the prophet Elisha is a great example of this. I want you to look on the screen with you. It's 1 Kings chapter 19. We know the main prophet in Israel at that time was Elijah. And God was getting ready to give Elijah a successor, an apprentice, an assistant. And his name was Elisha. And I want you to notice what Elisha does when he encounters God's call. Verse 19, it says, so Elijah went and found Elisha. We'll skip that name. Is that okay? He's plowing in a field. There were 12 teams of oxen in the field, and Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. So picture this. Elijah went over to him and threw his cloak across his shoulders and then walked away. Elisha left the oxen standing there, ran after Elijah and said to him, first let me go and kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I will go with you. Elijah replied, go on back, but think about what I have done to you. Now here's what he's saying. Don't be wishy-washy. God's call is going to ask you to make a major commitment with your life. And if you're not in this all the way, then stay home with mom and dad. Don't come follow me. That's what he's saying. So Elisha returned to his oxen. And picture this. He slaughtered them. He used the wood from the plow to build a fire to roast their flesh. He passed around the meat to the townspeople, and they all ate. Then he went with Elijah as his assistant. Isn't that a beautiful picture of somebody who was willing to let go? Of somebody who understood that God's call was better than anything else? That the greatest thing I can do with my life is to give my all to Jesus. To not get sidetracked by things that really aren't that important. You want to make an impact? Think about this. When you see a need, step towards it. When you see God working, guess what you do? You step towards it. When you feel God speaking to you or putting an impression upon your heart, you step towards the Lord instead of away from Him. We got to step towards God if we're going to make an impact with our life. And then here's the last thing Moses shows us. And this may sound kind of funny, but we've got to find our sweet spot. Look at verse number 10. Here's what God says to him. He says, "Now go, Moses, for I'm sending you to Pharaoh. And here it is. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt." Now here's the thing that I love about God. Moses didn't think he was qualified. Moses didn't think he was gifted. Moses didn't think he could do it. But God was saying to Moses, I didn't call you to lead sheep. I called you to lead people. I called you to lead my people, Israel, out of slavery in Egypt. And so guess what, Moses? I put gifts inside of you. I put passions inside of you. I put abilities inside of you that I want you to use them for me in the place that I'm preparing you for. That should excite us, church. That God's put things inside of us that we don't even know we have. And He wants to bring those things out of us so that we can do what He's called us to do. What's your sweet spot? What are you good at? What energizes you? What are you strong in? Because here's the thing, our sweet spot is an indication of our calling. And I thought about baseball. Some of you who are baseball fans or play baseball, I think you can relate to this analogy. On a baseball bat, there's a specific area on the baseball bat that's called the sweet spot. And the sweet spot does two things. The first thing it does is it makes the impact of the ball not vibrate the bat. Those of you that played baseball before, you know when you hit it wrong, the bat vibrates. And it stings your hands. You ever had to drop the bat before and you're just going like this? It's the vibrations of the bat stinging your hands. And when you hit the sweet spot, those vibrations aren't as strong. And then you know what else the sweet spot does? It helps the baseball come off of the bat faster. So you hit it longer, you hit it harder, and you hit it further because you hit the sweet spot. How many of you know God's got a sweet spot? Amen. For you? You believe that? We've got to discover that. Now here's the thing about the sweet spot though. When you discover the place that God has for you, don't miss this. It won't always feel sweet. It won't. But here's what you'll find out. What you'll discover is that you were made for this moment. And that God will use your gifts to help you be effective. So you want to make an impact? You start somewhere. Some of us, that's our marching orders today. That's what the Holy Spirit is speaking to your heart. Loud and clear. Start somewhere. Some of us, all of us, we just need to keep moving towards God. How many of you know we can't fulfill our calling on our own? We need Him. Every day. Every hour. And then we got to find our sweet spot. And I tried to come up with an illustration other than just a baseball bat. I like to have real life examples of sweet spot. And again, let me draw your eyes here. Why are we here? We're in Oshkosh for Oshkosh. And so I want to introduce you to somebody today who's found their sweet spot. Somebody who's making a tremendous impact in our community and in the lives of kids. And his name is Mr. Jim Hart. And I'm going to ask him if he would join me up here today. And I need a microphone so somebody can run real quick and help me. Thank you, sir. You're fast. I love that. Come up here, Jim. Join me if you would. Come on up here. Jim is the director and founder of a ministry, a Christian ministry in our area. Some of you have heard of it before. It's called Jubercosa. And it's he can explain it better than me, but it's a production company where children learn the skills and confidence that they need, not only just to stand in front of people and perform, but the skills that they need to just live life out. And they've been meeting here in our church for the last couple of weeks. We've opened up our doors and we've said, we want you to come in here and have a place to meet with your kids, a place where they're safe and comfortable. And we got a lot of those thank you notes, by the way. And you know what some of the kids said? We're just thankful for air conditioning. But I've watched how he's talked to the kids and how he's poured his life into the kids. And he's found his sweet spot. And he's making a difference. And I just want to give him an opportunity just to kind of share his heart with you today. And anything that you want to say to us.
Thank you, Pastor.
You're welcome.
Well, good morning. It is a whole different view from when we come in here during the week and the chairs are empty, and I think that's beautiful. But as I look out, this is amazing to see these seats filled and to finally get a chance to hear Pastor Marchetta speak to you. It has been a blessing. I won't, if I start going, you'll be here for hours if I start talking about how good God is and what He's done for our organization. This is our 31st year that we have done this, and we don't have a facility. We operate out of our home. My wife, Pamela, and I started this back in 1989 in Two Rivers. I was the drama director for the school district there, and we did one show a year. And a couple of the kids said, we love this. We want to do more, but the school district won't let us. So how do you look at young people when they have a desire to do something like that? And so we decided to start a production company at that time. And as the years went by and the cities changed and the schools changed and the venues changed and the rehearsal spaces changed, the kids didn't change. They stayed the same. Vulnerable sponges. And the opportunities that we have as adults and teachers became more prevalent to me, that these young people are very precious commodities. And we teach our young people that we have 5 things: our background, our circumstance, our relationship equals our self-image. That all equals our behavior. So our children grow up and become who they are because of the background and because of the circumstances that they are put in, and because of the relationships that they are around. That's how we become who we are. So God has been good to my wife and I to put us in this position. But listening to the message, I don't know if you're just thinking about us when you're preaching, but I mean, you ever get one of those moments where you look at the pastor and you kind of look away sometimes because you think, even though he's looking over there and I'm sitting over here, he's still looking right at you. So much of this is so what we do, so dependent on listening and the calling and the things that have happened. We called ourselves a ministry for a long time, but we were both still working because we didn't quite trust God to step off the edge and know there was His hand called a safety net and the Holy Spirit was going to guide us, because we have 4 children and we have a mortgage and we have all the bills, but we didn't trust God enough to say, God, we love working with young people. We think this ministry is amazing. We're going to teach them that if you train up a child in the way that they should go when they're older, they won't depart from it, but we don't trust you enough. We're still going to work. Well, He blessed, but He didn't bless fully because we were not doing the things that Pastor talked about this morning. And when we finally quit everything else we were doing and said, God, we're going to jump into this full time, boy, God even blessed even more than He did before. But we still didn't have a home. And I'm going to just finish this story quick because I know you all want to get home. But earlier this year, we were performing somewhere because Lila is one of our students in our Neenah location. We have locations in Neenah, Winneconne, and Oshkosh. And standing in the lobby, we didn't have a home after last year. Our facility that we had said, we're going to go a different direction. God bless you, and your ministry is great, but that was the end of that. So we didn't know where we were going to go with 200 kids the next year, but we kept pushing on with our registration, and we had talked to someone and they didn't get back, and we talked to someone, we didn't get back, and Lisa approached me and she said something to the paraphrase effect of, we have a beautiful facility. If you're looking for someplace, it's a Christ-centered, and well, yeah, I know where New Life is. That's great. However, we're already talking with someone, and it's going to work out great, and we have a home. And didn't know that God was rapping on my door saying, listen to her. But as confident and as cocky and as arrogant as we all get when we believe something else, we decide to go our own way. And those phone calls never returned from the other church. And the longer I waited, the harder it became to contact Lisa back and say, remember when we were... And that gets hard. If the longer we wait, it's like, the little kid that breaks his dad's drill bit, and it would have been fine if he just would have went to him right then, but he waits and waits and waits and waits and waits, and all that anxiety builds up, and 2 months later, when he tells his dad, there's nothing wrong. But what happened over those 2 months made him really learn something. Well, when I finally called Lisa back, and I came in, I think it was February, and met with Pastor, and I was so humbled at the fact of it was almost like your dad giving you the car keys for the first time, saying, see you later, have fun, bring it back in one piece. And it's pretty much what he said as he gave me the tour, and I just couldn't believe that God, once again, once I stopped looking this way and started looking this way, he blessed us with this amazing home. And then for Pastor to come up to me a couple of days ago and said, we'd like you to come back next year. For that load to be lifted off our shoulders as a nonprofit organization that do not have the finances to go somewhere for these young people, I want to say thank you to you, church, for allowing us. Many of you probably didn't even know we're here, but we've been here for 6 weeks. And we open our first show this Thursday night. So our younger students, who are ages 7 to 13, they are going to be doing The Lion King, opening this Thursday at the beautiful Winneconne Community Arts Center. And then the week after that, our older students that are aged 13 to 18 will be doing the musical Anything Goes over there. And then the following week, our Winneconne students will be doing Shrek. And then the following week, our Nina students will be doing Frozen. And then the following week, the 5th week, all of those kids, many of those kids will be doing Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat at the Alberta Kimball Auditorium. So it is quite an ambitious summer. But these young people, when you see that flower open and you see what they're able to do once somebody gives them the opportunity. And so many times we don't do that. You're not old enough, you're not old enough, you're not old enough. What does that mean? When is the magic age where you're finally old enough to break it and fix it yourself? And know that there's nothing wrong with making a mistake. It's what you do with the mistake after you make it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, Pastor and New Life Church, for allowing us to be in your beautiful facility. Many of you come on Sunday and you come back the following Sunday, but if you could just be little birds and see how grateful these young people are. And when their parents drop them off in this day that we live in, it is so important that you know who your child is going to be with, that you know that your child's going to be loved on, that you know that your child's being dropped off at a safe, Christ-centered environment with air conditioning. It's the complete package, and we are blessed beyond belief. I just want to let you know what jubicosa means. If you do not know, that it's not a foreign word. It's not Latin. We didn't pick it up somewhere. But jubicosa is actually the name of the company that my wife had brought to a very small organization while I was teaching at Valley Christian about 10 years ago. I was exclusively there, so I couldn't do anything on the outside. So our organization that we had before that, it was called Theatrics. And when I came to Valley Christian, Theatrics had to dissolve, and then they created the Oshkosh Academy for Performing Arts. Same thing, only a different name. And my wife decided she wanted to have something to do as well, and so she decided to take the first initials of our 4 children, Justin, Brittany, Courtney, and Samantha. They each get 2 letters. Brittany gets 3 because we needed the vowel, so she gets B-R-I. So jubicosa is a true family family organization that's Christ-centered, and everything we do within that organization centers on training up a child in the way they should go, so when they're older they will not depart from it. You are all major parts in this organization for us to continue into our 32nd year, and we know now we have a place. Now we just need kids to sign up next year for that. But we're all set to go into our fall production that we host those rehearsals at Valley Christian that comes alongside and supports us, as well as long as Gloria Day Church in Neenah, to make this all work. So again, thank you so much for staying a little longer and listening to this journey, and thank you for being on it with us. Thank you, Pastor.
Yes, thank you. All right.
Hey, thanks for watching our message today. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe below so you'll be updated on the latest messages as they're loaded. You can also give us a thumbs up and let us know how we're doing in the comments section. Thanks again for watching us, and have a great day.